Hey everybody, how's it going? So I appreciate like everybody was, I guess, patient enough to wait for the video last week to come a little few days late. Sorry about that. This one will be on time. Um, Also, I want to spend some time going over obviously some new material regarding public relations, which is basically what our new assignment deals with. Also, we have some papers out there that need to be graded, and including the paper that basically gets students' opinions on the Rutgers vaccination. Hopefully, people have contributed discussion points to that. Not everybody has. I'm looking at that as like, an opportunity for people to boost their class participation grade if they haven't already. Also, um, I also need to grade so that's something I need to grade hopefully by next week. Also, I need to grade your worksheets. Um, let's actually talk about that a little bit right now before I get to the Billboard Megalomania assignment. Okay. Live an ish. So let's see what we got here. So let's do the share the screen. Okay. All right. So for this, I was really, again, like trying to get everybody just to be as specific as possible. So, some things, obviously there's always like a judgment or an opinion attached to this or something like that. It's always a little bit subjective to decide like what's more important or not, but ultimately it's objective to basically come out with information that everybody can connect to. So like 3 to 4 children dying every day, that was something that was obviously much more significant than reporting that cases rose from 2.5 to 2.7, because that's something that basically it's tangible that people can see and hear. Okay. I talk about the biggest, newest thing that people were looking for, in a robbery. To me, the latest thing that happened is that somebody getting arrested, and we have 150 people getting arrested. That's significant. That's obviously significant that 2,500 people showed up, but 150 of them got arrested. So that's a lot of people being arrested. Okay. These three right here, the numbers was what mattered. Okay. 53% increase in murders. I don't want to live in that town. Okay. So yeah, a number in itself, it can be a story, but it's a number that actually has significance. Obviously, again, if you have like a number where, the increase in murders goes from like 2 to 3, obviously that's, 2 to 3 cases or something like that. But I think basically in this actually says, in your state, 53%, that's probably a lot of murders. Okay. So that's a significant jump. So think about it in terms of common sense. If you're a reader and you actually like see something that actually like, shows like that kind of an increase, obviously a 1% increase, you probably wouldn't be that interested in it, but 50%, yes, you would be. Just think of your own common sense. Same thing here with a 10% increase in skin cancer. Think of it if like suddenly like after this drop in COVID cases, there was suddenly a 10% turn back upward, that would be significant. You would care, you want to know. So this one right here, again, for me, there's so many different like things that happen in terms of crime and that sort of thing in this world. But for crying out loud, the Easter Bunny, this is why the second half of the semester I talk about how we actually try to delve more into the reporting end of things. And for me, that's actually something you get out of reporting, is that you try to make whatever story that's actually typically common, something that happens like often and frequent. Unfortunately, attempted murders do happen too often, too common. But you try to get try a little bit more of the story behind the story. Okay. So to me, that the motive that was important. It was basically like, eating a chocolate Easter bunny. That's something that probably would end up like maybe even on the national news, because it's just so weird and ridiculous and stupid and bad. So, all right. Same thing here with like going back to the numbers, a 12% increase in tuition. Okay. The Missouri Board of Curators, obviously, again, I would care about that because that's that money out of my pocket. Okay. So anyway, so I hope to have those to you very soon. Okay. Those are the graded rewrites for that. Okay. I also did issue some warning grades to people. It's obviously, it's important to let people know how they're doing. have a bit of a freak out over that in the past. But, to be honest with you, I mean, you know, I have to basically let people know, especially in our setting, like how they're doing. And it doesn't mean necessarily you're going to fail. It's just that it means that, you should be alert to the fact that like you're just not doing enough to make your grade better. And I feel like there are some people who really need to kind of pick up in that way. And maybe they're not even like participating at all. And I mean, it's not like I can take attendance here, but I mean, I can basically tell who's really engaged and who's not. Okay. So, all right. So what do we have due? We have actually some reading assignments we have to do. And then this, of course, is due on October 28th. The rewriting Megalomania press release assignments. Okay. So I have my lecture that I posted last week. Again, the idea was to really contact Bill for the first time by noon on Friday last week, but you can contact him again. Okay. And again, the whole idea here, this is what we get in reporting into things, is try, much like that Easter Bunny problem, information, you want to get the story behind the story. What is the story that really matters to people? What's the story that actually that people will care about, people will pay attention to, will kind of, be more than just, okay, so we know that actually people in the corporate world do bad things, and then they also do, and companies have to respond. And this is all what they call spin. So when companies have something bad happen, something not so good, and I'm giving a strong hint here, the company has to respond. They're actually going to try to make it appear as though it's not such a big deal, right? So let's look at that release actually. So what you need to do basically is to go through this release. And as I said, you go by the date that's here. It's actually the date it's due. So you can almost pretend that actually when you actually do send it, it's actually that day, okay? Which is a Wednesday, right? So the idea here is to basically write this as though the public relations people, what they try to do is they try to actually write stories for the media essentially. The media is their audience essentially. What they try to do is try to craft things so that the media will actually, care, okay, that the media will actually, but also that they want the media, they want to control the message, okay? It's your job as a media interpreter to kind of take that control back, okay? That's one of the unfortunate things about, that's why people hold press conferences, politicians, whatever, because they want to be able to control the message, okay? If they don't, if they do that, then especially with reporters who are on deadline and they have a lot of time to do things, then it's it's actually hard to really kind of get that control back, because everything is kind of dictated by the news conference. But you have to do what you can during the news conference to make sure you ask the questions that matter. And unfortunately, sometimes you have a situation where obviously there's a press conference and the people won't answer questions, or they won't answer enough questions, or they'll walk away, or they'll spin it, in a certain way. So, so it's your job to basically try to get this control back. That's what you need to do here. Okay. And as I said, that's another big hint. The first thing here you're going to see is not the story. Okay. First thing you're going to see here is what the company wants you to care about first. And that's, they're doing this thing, they're reorganizing. Oh boy, but who really gives a shit? Okay. I mean, that's actually significant if you're obviously involved in business. Think about it in terms of Disney. Okay. And Disney says they're going to reorganize or whatever. I mean, does that really matter? It matters to people who invest in the company, and that matters directly. Matters to people who are actually maybe in the circle of the company's influence, or people who have business interests connected to them, that sort of thing. But it doesn't ever matter to the average consumer. Most of the people who read newspapers or news sites or that sort of thing. So what they do, let's say I'm trying to say Megalomania in this case, it's a made up company, okay? But it's basically do we really care whether they actually reorganize or not? Let's say, and again, like I said, let's say it's Disney, okay? This reminds me a long time ago, 1989, Exxon Valdez, that was a boat that actually like crashed into the shores of Alaska. It spilled all over the place, oil all over the place. And the company afterwards trying to spin it as though they were on top of it and blah blah blah, and they were organized in the company, and that's the story they wanted you to believe. But what they didn't want you to know was that the guy who was operating the boat was drunk, okay, and from my understand, or under some sort of medication or something. And that when he crashed, he killed a lot of wildlife. So that what they didn't want you to see was that, obviously, okay? So that's what this company is basically, another strong hint is trying to prevent you from doing, is to see that, So you have to go through this and say like, okay, what really matters to people? And in that particular case with the Exxon Valdez, the matter to people was not that they were organizing the way Exxon was doing shipping business or whatever. They cared about like, what could have prevented this from happening? What was it that actually like, caused all the wildlife to die? Okay. So basically we have the forming of the office of chief executive. We have the people who were appointed and everything. And again, you can't Google this, by the way, because this is all kind of made up. I've had people Google this and say like they found these names. These names actually can be found on the internet. But what Bill and I did as a kind of like almost like a private joke was we actually found members of the 1979 Mets. Yes, I know, really nerdy. And we inserted their names here and basically made up a story, okay? The whole idea being that you can't just like copy this from the internet. Sorry. Okay, so basically you have people who are appointed. We have here like, again, like, the background of the people, Mian, that's how you pronounce his last name. Okay, he sold his company to the media conglomerate, blah, 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 some background. Mr. Garrett, more about him. He helped orchestrate the acquisition of the company's theme park operations, blah, blah, blah. Some stuff on Youngblood, okay? All right, and then, basically how this is supposed to help the company and like for the future and that sort of thing, the management structure, that sort of thing. Help to pursue its strategy of providing a broad range of entertainment, or basically the corporate culture will not change. The board of directors asked for and received the resignation of Mark Bronson, okay? And then the board concluded that the facts reflected poorly on Bronson's judgment. You can almost like take these items and almost like list them one by one and just kind of almost pretend if you're the reader and rank them in like the order of like who, what you really care about. What really happened here that caused everything else to happen? What happened here was significant to actually cause the company to actually reorganize, right? So they felt like they needed to do that to kind of save face, right? So that's what you have to think about here, okay? All right, so again, please like email Bill, whatever, and let him know that you care, you're on this. If you have any questions, you could also certainly ask me too. But the whole idea here is to really kind of go beyond your borders and interview, and get information that otherwise isn't obviously there, okay? To go beyond the press release and actually write a story out of this that actually makes sense. And yes, you can get to 500 words easily once you get the information. The information you get from Bill, by the way, the first thing he's going to give you might be a little confused by, okay? And it's going to be a document, okay? Basically, think of it a way, but the document's going to basically provide more detail on what and then you might have even more questions. So then you actually have to reach out to Bill again, okay? Yeah, I know. That's why you're given 2 weeks to do this, okay? And basically find out like, okay, you give me this document, what does this all mean? Like, why is this really what led to the situation changing? Is this, is there anything else that could come out of this? Why is the company like, what kind of sort of situation is the company facing anyway? What can you tell me about? All right. Remember that this is his email address right here. You have to contact Bill at least twice, I would say, at least twice. Okay. All right. So that is that. Let's go to the chapters 17 and 19. I'm actually running a little bit behind in terms of like viewing chapters, but these are 2 chapters I asked you to read these past 2 weeks. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is basically both ends of public affairs reporting, okay? So public affairs reporting, essentially, I mean, this is what Bill has been doing for a number of years, as we described last week. He's, you know, basically journalism isn't just always writing for a news organization. It's also, that news also can be provided by companies themselves. And I know there's probably a lot of like journalism gods are probably going to like shoot me for saying it, but it's true that basically um, you know, it's all media, it's all providing information. It's just a matter of like, who's your audience, you know? It's just that, you know, the people who work for public information or public affairs departments, the spokespeople, okay, spokesman, spokeswoman, they have a job to do, and that is basically to report information for their for their company, okay, and get the information out there and control the message. Much like the White House has a spokesperson, Jen Psaki, chief communications director, I believe she is, or something, or chief White House press officer, I forget her title, that actually acts as the spokesperson for Biden, okay? And then, so what these chapters deal with is both ends of it. Basically, the whole idea of actually being in that role and the audience you have to cater to, which is the media, and that the information you have to get across, and then also being on the media side and handling it, okay? All right, so let's like just basically go into this a little bit here in chapter 17. I am dealing a little bit with a slow internet. I actually started with a whole different, I had gone about maybe 10 minutes into a video and I had to redo it because I had problems with my internet. But probably one of the most common places you'll see like any kind of like information coming out. And this goes to the whole thing, that problem thing, the Easter Bunny thing before, okay, is police matters are typically handled by spokespeople, okay? And, you know, because how do like police typically release information, okay? Actually, I should have thought of actually having this out ahead of time. Let's see what we got here. You know, when police release information, they typically release it in a way that's actually very difficult to understand. Okay, so as I'm showing you right here, here's probably an example of that right here. Usually comes in this kind of form. Okay, example of a police report. On the 1st of January 1st, 2001, I was dispatched to the Loggerhead Island, blah, blah, blah. You see, as I was describing earlier in the semester, like with the Titanic, and I was probably coming across Morse code, the information they typically release is actually like comes across like very much this way, very much in some sort of official speak, like police speech. Someone's very jargony, that sort of thing. It's your job to actually, now we're talking on the media side of things, actually, well, I'm sorry, if you're a spokesperson, it's your job to try to interpret that in a way that basically the media can understand. And, you know, I mean, what Bill will always tell you is that probably the most important thing for like and I know there's probably some spokespeople who actually disagree with this. I mean, make sure the thing you do is, again, to be as close to the truth as possible, okay? Because if you're a spokesperson, you release information that basically is, you know, not like maybe spun in a way, much like the way we just described, you're probably going to lose some credibility. So you want to make sure that you get information out there that is clear and crisp as possible, and basically is you want to make sure you connect to the reporters too. You want to make sure the message gets out there and it's done in a way. What you really try to do is, you're not necessarily trying to hide information when you're a spokesperson, but what you're trying to do is make sure that the information that goes out there is correct. And obviously you want to have it to come out there in a way that actually like obviously will help will maybe benefit whatever company you're serving. But the best way to do that is to essentially make sure that you're accurate and you're clear and you're focused, okay? The first assignment many newspaper reporters have, and then that way when you actually are on the police beat or something, you have the ability to actually interpret things in a correct way, okay? And it says here, the first assignment many newspaper reporters have is the police beat. Getting television or radio journalists might have more varied assignments, but covering crimes and accidents will be a major part of their jobs as well. Not all police reporters are beginners. Some are covered the beat, blah, blah, blah. So this is a network of police reporters varies with the size and type of community. So anyway, a lot of the information for these stories available at police headquarters and police stations, okay? The reporters must be able to write their stories without ever leaving headquarters or a newsroom, well, ideally, right. But usually you have somebody essentially, you know, it says here basically you might have sources in the police department, okay? But usually there's actually somebody who is actually a police officer who actually is trained in the whole activity of actually like dispensing the information. And again, the job is for them is to basically protect the community. And the way to protect the community is to make sure that the information is accurate. Okay. They want to make sure, well, police officers do this, police departments do this often, and that is that they release information and they, again, as I described earlier in the semester, will, you know, they might have like, you know, the wrong spelling of a name, and that could get everybody into trouble. Okay. All right. Much of this chapter basically talks about the whole process of actually, you know, coming to, you know, getting that information and reporting it. But it also talks about some of the things I just talked about, like, you know, avoiding like words and phrases that are typically used in police departments, like it says, never say a crime was committed by an unidentified person. Okay. Criminals rarely announce their identities. That's a typical, you know, phrase that's actually used by a police department, unidentified person. Okay. Most criminals are never identified. Similarly, if police do not know a criminal's identity, the story cannot report that the police are looking for a suspect. Police have a suspect only if they have good reason to believe a particular person committed the crime. Reporters also should, before using the phrase person of interest, terms like suspect, target, or material witness have specific legal meanings. Yeah, and you also, sometimes the jargon that's used also, there's like legal meanings behind it. So you want to make sure that whatever is used is actually like correctly defined, you know. Okay, and it talks about city governments, you know, it's the same thing, you know, basically, you know, you're going to have to deal with issues like, you know, reporting things that, you know, you go to a council meeting or something like that. I used to do this as a regular assignment for this class a long time ago. I used to have us actually cover a council meeting, but it actually proved a little too logistically problematic for that. And now it'd be even worse now since I'm not quite out of the COVID pandemic just yet. But anyway, it says basically like, you know, one of the things you get out of like a text, you get out of a meeting, there's so much talking and that sort of thing. But like hidden beneath that is like something that's usually like the most important thing that could ever be discussed at a council meeting, and that is a tax increase. Okay. And that goes back to the numbers thing I talked about, where you have all this discussion, all this talk about this happening and that happening, and you know, people complaining about things and everything. But like, you know, money matters. They say you follow the money. They said that in all the movie All the President's Men. There's probably no more important thing that comes out of a political meeting than actually like how the money is being spent, and not just by the council, but also by the people themselves. So anyway, so that's what we have here essentially, is that you want to make sure that you know, paying attention to all things that are involving money. Okay. It goes into a little bit about like, you know, how things were organized in terms of like, you know, government agencies, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously like getting sources, you know, I'm trying to sum up things here a bit, but it talks about obviously some of the most important sources, obviously the people who are the heads of boards, the mayors, you know, the police chief, that sort of thing. But sometimes it's not always that. Sometimes it's somebody who, you know, is maybe somebody a little bit lower in the thing. If they don't have like a spokesperson or something like that, it's good to like basically not necessarily make friends with people in these entities or something, but it's important to actually like just make connections, you know, build up trust with people, so that make sure that you can get information you might not otherwise might not be easily to get. Okay. You know, it talks about the courts. You know, it's actually obviously important when you're actually covering like, you know, any kind of like criminal cases and everything. Probably the most important thing you can do is make sure you're talking to the lawyers. Lawyers actually like to talk. And lawyers also are very much interested in making sure that actually information comes out correctly. And sometimes you might have to deal with a situation where, you know, it's a big court case or something like that, and they'll probably have somebody who's a spokesperson. You have to deal with something like a prosecutor. The prosecutor might not come out and speak him or herself. Again, you have a person who actually is in charge of controlling the message and trying to make sure the message comes out clearly, and that would be a spokesperson. Okay. All right, let me just like kind of flip through here. All right, yeah, so that's basically what essentially chapter 17 deals with. Okay, chapter 19, journalism and public relations. Okay, so both journalists and public relations practitioners research and write stories for the public. The journalists write stories provide an objective account of current events and issues. The PR practitioner, which can be a spokesperson, writes news releases, also called press releases, that promote a client in the hopes of getting stories published in the news media or circulated. So, I mean, that's another thing, is that they're not just actually out to basically make sure information is accurate, but they also want to make sure the information is out. Okay. It's interesting, like, you know, with police departments, you could get both situations. I mean, police departments, you know, they very much are interested in the idea of actually getting information out if it actually is something that shows that the police department is doing its job. Okay. Um, and, you know, they'll probably promote the big cases. Okay. They obviously will do things like promote cases that involve like a police officer might like save somebody's life or something like that, you know. But you know, they're gonna show that, especially like if it's a prosecutor or something like that, they're gonna show that they're actually obviously on top of the situation and involves like, you know, you know, that a department is investigating a murder and that they're on top of things or something. Okay. You know, there's actually this case that happened recently, you know, where I feel like it's interesting because you feel like, and I know it's like, well, I think I've talked about this case a little bit, but this whole case with Gabby Petito, who was actually a woman who was actually, I guess she was a murderer essentially, right? And then that her boyfriend, or I guess fiance, has been on the lam. And I feel like right now the police department, I mean, they didn't really keep track of things, it seems like, or they kind of let this boyfriend go. But it's interesting because I feel like this is the particular time where maybe like the police department, you just don't really know, are they doing their job or are they not? And this is where like a spokesperson could actually like get in between you and the case, you know, the media and the case, and probably explain things. And by sometimes not necessarily a case you want to promote, but you want to make sure the information out there is correct and accurate. So you want to get out there and make sure the department's name is being saved and they actually are on the case. So I always felt like that case was maybe the example where maybe they could show that they actually are, if they are, I don't know, maybe they're not, maybe, but if they are on the case, maybe they need to get that information out there. So it's always better for like, you know, a police department to actually be speaking than not, or anybody to be really speaking than not. It says here that PR practitioners, sometimes they're hired, sometimes act as independent. Bill has always been like a hired person, you know, I guess a hired gun, as you could say, a person who comes in there and basically helps out whatever, right now he's working for an accounting firm. So he actually basically deals with them and helps get their information out. And that accounting firm, by the way, right now is dealing with a lot of like downsizing and stuff like that. So they will, you know, basically try to like spin that in a way, I guess you could say, so that it makes it look like it's not such a bad idea, even though there's layoffs going on or something. Okay. That there's still, but they want to get the information out there that they're still operational and there's still a place you can do business with. Right. You know, basically it talks about basically where the public relations people work. Obviously the big companies, the small companies, you know, against the government agencies, working with the news media. Public relations practitioners use various media to get information out about their client to the public. They determine which media outlets will best serve their purposes. Okay, so yeah, they do that. They pick and choose. It's not fair necessarily, but that's what they do. Okay, that's why it's important to build up a relationship. You know, it doesn't have to be like one that like compromises your integrity, but basically one that at least earns their trust and respect. That you're able to do their job. And I realize that there's a lot of PR people who don't care about that. Okay, but you know, to think their promotional efforts effective, practitioners also learn to whom to contact, identify the proper news departments and the people in charge before sending out a news release. So that's something that happens to me all the time. I get it because I'm actually in insurance, and I actually report about the insurance industry. I get a lot of information of like what's the latest thing happening in the insurance industry and people trying to promote things. Okay. And I do a lot of actually setting up. I mean, right now I have to deal with like people who are like at the top of their field and their companies, that sort of thing. So basically, I have to deal with a lot of people who, who are. I have to deal with like people who are in between them and me, and they actually help set up the interview, that sort of thing. And I may even sit on the interview, which is a lot of times actually now done on a Zoom and that sort of thing. Okay. They write stories, much like they write because they write news releases or something like that. They do things like advanced stories. They'll let people know what's going on. Sometimes they'll do this thing called embargo, or they'll actually like tell people, well, this information can't be released until a certain time. They do that because they want to get, because they're actually also interconscious of the internet. They try to pick the time and place where it's actually where they have the maximum effect of most, where they know they can get the most eyes on something. Okay. So there's a lot of staging that goes on involved here. Obviously, if there's like an event going on with their company or something, excuse me, they want people to be out there and know, like, you know, like that it's going on and it's happening. Okay. Okay, tips for effective news releases: list a contact and a follow person. So I mean, at least with this Bill Borden release, we had that. So you basically have to contact him. You send the release out on time, okay? And then you use a journal. You basically try to, his order was different on the Megalomania assignment than you would for your story, obviously. But you do have, there's still the who, what's, and where, whys. But again, you're not going to earn like a ton of credibility as a news release writer if you leave out like some important information. Okay, so if you got to write well, that's actually an exercise I do when I actually have in-person classes. I show everybody this press release that was written by this old company, AOL, in 2001 when they had this big merger and they lost like a ton of money or something. But it was this news release, they wrote it in a way, it was like so horribly written. And it was actually really hard to define, the actual news that was going on, but it was something like a $500 million loss, $1 billion loss, or some crazy number like that, or $50 billion. You want to like make sure that like the news, because if you have it in like written away, it's like gobbledygook, it's not going to come out accurate. It's not going to come out clear. News reporter might not even bother to care. And news reporter might even get pissed, and might be like ready to like make sure that actually like, that you're burned some way, because you basically burn them with the crappy news release. Okay. You want to make sure things that matter, like to the reporter, like, does it matter? Is it within their proximity? Is it within their state, their town? Is it within their industry? Okay. You want to be able to provide things like photos. Okay. Especially nowadays, because it's, back in the day, we used to actually just take those photos ourselves. Now we just rely on the studio photos that are provided by different companies or something. If it's like a person, that of a person. This chapter provides basically like, how a deconstruction of how essentially, a journalist handles and deals with a news release. Okay. And then of course, there's different issues that happen that basically will cause you to reject a release. And that is that it basically doesn't have proximity or it's not timely or whatever. And that happens. There's a lot of like tossing of news releases or basically ignoring of news releases that goes on. And then he says rewriting for newsworthiness, which is what we're doing with Megalomania. Writers of news releases sometimes are more interested in pleasing their bosses than in satisfying the media or informing the public. They're inappropriate begin their releases with the CEO's name, So basically, they're going to obviously write things in their own self-interest, but, but again, their audience is the media and they want you to write it in their way. Your audience is the people, the world. So you want to write it in a way that the world cares. Okay. Obviously, like non-news releases are going to have lack objectivity. Okay. So there's that issue. So you want to make sure that they're as straight as and narrow as possible. Okay. They're going to maybe even have a little bit of their opinion in it. They're definitely going to have spin. Okay. They're going to think that like, there's like whatever they're telling the story about first is more important than what you care about. Okay. Obviously their stories are going to be one-sided. Okay. And ideally we would like to get this story to be two-sided, but that's the whole idea of actually going to Bill Borden and basically, and making sure that actually, you have more than just a news release to write about. You have another voice, to basically provide balance to the story and get more information. Okay. All right, so that's really it. Okay, so let me know if you have any more questions. Let me know if you have any more issues. Let me know if you have any especially with the release itself and everything. Okay. Obviously, again, you need to reach out to Bill Borden. You should have maybe done that already. And you can also reach out to me too. Thanks very much, guys, and I will be talking.